Greetings, Blood Bowlers, and welcome to the All or Nuffle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Blood Bowl. Greetings, Blood Bowlers, and welcome back to the second ever episode of the All or Nuffle podcast. Now, I appreciate you might be a little bit confused, actually, at seeing this episode and the title of it and what we're going to be talking about, because in the first ever episode, I told you the next episode would be a Skaven Spotlight with a guest host in the form of my friend Gav. And that is still going to happen. However, today, Thursday, at the time of recording, I had a little bit of extra time, the house to myself, nice and quiet. So I figured I'd squash in the first ever Team Spotlight episode, and we'll talk about my favourite team, the Wood Elves. So don't worry, for you Skaven guys out there, there is definitely still going to be a Skaven Spotlight being recorded this Saturday. It may be available for you guys Saturday evening. I'll probably leave it and publish it Sunday morning. But yeah, rest assured that's still coming. I just figured an extra little bonus episode while I can get one in. And as I mentioned, we are going to be talking about the Wood Elves. Just a quick overview. We're going to talk about the team in general. We're going to speak about each individual positional and lineman and all that business, and the cost of them, as well as cost of rerolls, what skills they have access to, and all that business. And then I'll talk through some of the starting rosters that I've not used them all. I have a very particular way that I do mine, but I've seen all of them have success, is what I'm trying to get at. So, without further ado, let's start talking about the Woodies. The Woodies are kind of in the same school of Skaven, in the sense that everyone kind of rolls their eyes when you tell them that you play them, because they are really good. They are high up there on the meta. They're a really good team. They have their weaknesses, and there are teams out there that can just absolutely undo them. But generally, they're just really well-performing teams. As you would imagine, the same way with any fantasy setting, elves are not necessarily the strongest in terms of, how much damage they can take, or they're not hardy, but they're super fast. And that rule applies in Blood Bowl the very same as it would in all other fantasy settings. So Wood Elves are one of those teams that my playstyle, at least, is if I'm playing against a team that I cannot match in strength, they've got a couple of strength 4 players, I will almost always avoid getting into base contact so that only one of my guys can get hit that turn, from the blitz action. Obviously, sometimes you cannot avoid it. You want to stop people from being able to move and stuff, so you have to grin and bear it and take potentially 2 and 3 dice blocks against your guys. But generally, they're the kind of team that you will not be gunning for physical contact with your opponent's team. Some positions more than others, but the general idea for me and the way I play it is I play very cautiously. I like to sit back a little bit. Especially if I'm in possession of the ball, I like to sit back and let my opponent move around. And then hopefully my opponent is going to unknowingly leave me an alley or a gap for me to be able to take advantage of with the Wood Elves' speed. Now, just because they're fast does not mean that they're always good at scoring. Every single team in this game is susceptible to rolling ones when you're doing your rushes, or you go for it, should I say, and falling flat on the face. Despite having a 2+ agility across the board, they're still more than capable of rolling ones when dodging out into the open and falling on the face. They can still fail catching passes, they can fail at throwing passes and all that business. They do still have their weaknesses in the same way that every other team does. It's just that they're a little bit better at the more agility-esque stuff in the game. So, yeah, they're not a strong team. You will it is very rare that even if you take a tree man, because Wood Elves can take a big guy, a tree man, I would be very surprised, even with a tree man, if you're board wiping an opponent. It's very rare you're going to have like 4, 5, 6 of your opponent's players knocked out and or in the injury box with Wood Elves. It could happen. Obviously, it's not impossible in the same way that it's not impossible for Wood Elves to make mistakes and roll ones and be bad at things. But I would be very surprised. They're very much a kind of team where they force you to be reactive. Reactive playing is what I call it, and it is very much what I described a little bit ago. Of I'm going to set up in a position that I think is safe, let my opponent make all the big decisions, and then I'm going to react to his decisions, like where he moves, where he doesn't move, like where he commits to blocks and blitzes and things like that. And then you can use that template afterwards. Right, my opponent's played his hand. How can I expose that hand that he's played? Like that's there might be people out there who go toe to toe with their opponents with Wood Elves and try to turn it into a smashing match. And you can definitely do that if you're playing a team that's equal in strength. Like there are plenty of teams out there that have strength 3 across the board, like Wood Elves, that you could go toe to toe with. But generally, as safe practice, I like to keep as many people alive as possible. So I will almost always lean to reactive play. It's only if I were playing a team that's got a lot of strength 2 things that I would maybe be a little bit more punchy with my playstyle. For example, if I were playing Snotlings, you've got your two trolls. If I avoid those, everybody else on the team is strength 2. So then I would probably be a little bit more aggressive with my play. But again, this is one of those things in Blood Bowl that is always going to come down to personal opinion. End of the day, I can give you advice. I can tell you what I think is best. But ultimately, you can take any team you want and play with them however you want. So please don't think that this is the gospel and what I say is, absolutely how you should do Blood Bowl. Absolutely not. If it works, if you manage to ignore everything I say and it works for you, then I was wrong and your opinion's right. It's all about perspective and it's all relative to yourself. So let's move on to speak about the positions of the Wood Elf team and we're going to speak about the cost of them. We're going to go through the characteristics, some of the traits, and then we'll talk about some of the skills they have access to when it comes to developing those players in a league setting. Naturally, the unsung hero of every Blood Bowl team, and it's also the unsung hero of every NFL team in the real world. The first to get blamed, the last to get recognition. We are talking about the lineman, the Wood Elf lineman. You can take between 0 and 12 of these guys, so you're limited to between 0 and 12, so you could have your entire team be linemen if you wanted to. They're going to set you back 70,000 gold each. This is assuming that we're building a team of 1 million gold. Some people do house rule things a little bit higher. I've done it before. I do sometimes like to play at 1.150. Just allows people to take some extra stuff that can make it a bit more fun. But in a competitive setting, you will generally stick to the million. Anyway, so yeah, 0 to 12 Wood Elf linemen. They're going to set you back 70k a piece, which is slightly above average for a lineman in Blood Bowl. I think it's the Imperial Nobility that have 60k linemen, so it's not expensive, but it's a little bit more than what you can pay for other teams. But for your 70k, you are getting a movement 7 lineman. Movement 7. Just to put into perspective for you, the highest movement in the game is 9 in the form of gutter runners. Then which I think they're the only ones that have 9. And then the second one, the more popular higher movement for faster players is your 8, and then 7. The most common movement across the board is probably 6. I know that the highest movement on the dwarf team is the runner at 6. I think the entire human team, barring the catchers, is 6. 6 is kind of like the middle point. So if you want to judge whether a player's got good movement, 6, it's all right. It's kind of where you need it to be. Less than that, you kind of need to start planning for their moves a turn in advance. If you're wanting to move them quite a distance, it's going to take you a couple of turns, so you want to be thinking ahead a little bit. Whereas then you've got your 7s, your 8s, and obviously your 9s in the forms of gutter runner. They're just, you don't even have to worry about them. You just know that they're going to be able to get where you want them to get. So that is probably where your cost of 70k comes in to justify that, that movement 7. Then we've got Strength 3. Strength 3 is very much like the Movement 6. It is the bog standard across the board in Blood Bowl. Smaller stuff gets less than 2, and less than 3, sorry, and bigger stuff gets more than 3. A lot of like medium-sized guys get 4, and then your big guys like your ogres and your trolls and your treemen get 5, and I believe there's even some sixes in there. Yeah, I'm looking right now. The treeman for the Wood Elves is actually 6, to be fair. So yeah, you've got real good movement, average strength, but another reason that you're paying that cost is you have got agility 2+. So you are pretty much moving out into the open away from opposing players and only ever failing on a 1, which I did mention can happen. Obviously, anything can happen when you're playing a dice game, but 2+ agility is fantastic. That means that, like I say, you're dodging away from players into the open on a 2+. You're catching the ball on a 2+, as long as there's no minuses from like distance throws and stuff. You're picking the ball up on a 2+. You're receiving handoffs on a 2+. As long as you're not being marked or anything, if all those things I've just mentioned are taking place in the open, you are only ever failing on a 1. Obviously, there are certain minus modifiers for if you're marked when you commit some of those actions. But if all those actions are taking place, in the open, you are only ever going to fail on a 2. And that's your lineman. That's not a positional, that's a lineman. So the thing here is the 70k for movement 7 and agility 2+ is fantastic. The next skill is passing ability. See, this might surprise people, but we're going for a passing ability of 4+. These are not the people you want passing the ball with Wood Elves. You do not, I mean, they can. If you're doing some really short passes that aren't any minus modifiers, a 4+ is not a terrible roll to attempt. It's essentially 50-50. But you don't want to be leaning on these guys to do all of your passing. So, as you'll see when we speak through the throwers, which are the next positional, you want to use every other position on this team to support and protect the passers and help them do the throwing, sorry. Now, you see, a lineman can absolutely be the target of a pass because, as we saw with the 2+ agility, it's only ever going to fail on a 1. So it can definitely be the target for a pass. I mean, like I say, if it's not marked or anything, it's catching the ball on a 2+. And then it's got movement 7, so if you ping it up the field, it's got a good chance of scoring with its movement of 7 after catching it. And then the final characteristic for the Wood Elf is 8+ armor value. And this is where Wood Elves can come undone. 8+ armor is not very good. It's not the weakest. I think there is some 7+ out there, maybe, with some snotlings or stuff, but it's definitely at the lower end in terms of strength when it comes to armor. And this is where, when I was saying keeping your guys away from your opponent's guys, especially if they're stronger, is going to come in handy, because all it takes is for your opponent to get a 2 dice block against any of your guys, because your entire team, barring the tree man, is 8+ armor across the board. All it takes is a 2 dice block and a POW, and all they've got to roll to break your armor is an 8 on 2 dice. That's all they need. That's right, and they're one of those teams you're not designed to go toe to toe with people. You're not designed to take the fight to people. You're designed to sort of like run past them. But again, you can play however you want. So your Wood Elf linemen, when it comes to developing them during league play, or even indeed in tournaments, their primary skills are agility and general, with their secondary skills being strength. They've got absolutely no access to passing skills and obviously no access to mutations. So just for anybody that isn't aware, what this means is primary skills, when you play in a league, your players can earn essentially experience that in Blood Bowl they call star player points. And then once they earn enough, they can spend them to buy new skills. If you're buying a skill from the primary section, i.e. an agility or a general skill of your player, it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than to buy a secondary skill. I think the first primary skill costs 6 SPP, and I think the first secondary costs you 12. So it's literally double. And the reason for this is, like, obviously it's a wood elf, so it's going to be agile. It's got access to general, but although it has the potential to be strong, the game wants it to be more difficult for you to access those strength skills. Hence why they cost more. So yeah, you've got your primary skills that you can access, agility and general ones, and secondary of strength. So that is the lineman. A good lineman, really. The cost is high, but the cost is justified. The reason we didn't talk about any skills or anything for the Wood Elf lineman is because they come with nothing. There is no skills or traits at all. We moved straight on from armor onto primary and secondary options for development because there are no skills whatsoever. So, the next position on the Wood Elf team is the thrower. You can take a maximum of 2, and they're going to set you back 95k each, which is expensive, but these are the guys that are going to be the workhorses for scoring. These are the guys that you want. Now, controversially, I very rarely take any more than 1, and people that'll be thinking that is absolute insanity. What if you're playing in a league and that one thrower gets killed? You're without a thrower. And you're right. You're absolutely right. But I do find that dropping that extra thrower allows me to be able to get more catches or even save towards an extra war dancer. And then I just protect the hell out of that one catcher. And I'm going to touch some wood. Up to this point, throughout the 3 leagues they've played in and been champions of, and the 2 tournaments they've played in and won, the Wood Elf catcher, the one I take, has never been killed. It's been knocked out once or twice for a drive or 2, but it's never been killed. So I'm going to knock on wood again because I really don't want that to happen. So, for your 95k for a catcher, you're going to get movement 7 again, which is obviously, we know, is pretty average for a Wood Elf team, but across the board is really high. You're going to get strength 3 again, across the board, pretty average. 2 plus agility, as I said, the entire team is picking up the ball, catching the ball, dodging away from opponents on a 2 plus, as long as all those actions partake in the open. And this is where this guy comes in clutch with a passing ability of 2 plus. Now, the distance of a pass that you make in Blood Bowl does determine if there are any minus modifiers. So, the range tool that you use for measuring your passes in Blood Bowl is split into 4 sections. If the pass you're trying to make is only the distance of the first section, there's no minus modifier. It's just off the throwing player's passing ability. So in this case, would be a 2 plus. If you're throwing to a target that's within the second zone, that will be a pass at a -1. So the thrower would actually be achieving it on a 3 plus instead. And so on and so forth. You get a -2, -3. So the absolute worst, without taking into account any marking or anything like that, like let's just assume that you're throwing from in the open, the absolute worst that a Wood Elf thrower is throwing on is a 5 plus, which, considering that's for the maximum distance throw, is not bad at all. It's not bad. And then when you get a couple of skills, like there's a skill Cannoneer, which reduces modifiers for long passes and long bombs, which are the -2 and -3 modifier. You bring that down to a -2 and a -1, meaning the worst you can do is a 4 plus. So absolutely fantastic. The absolute best thrower in the game by far. Onto armor value, as I said, the entire team has got 8 plus across the board, We spoke about what's good and bad about this with the lineman. That applies to absolutely everybody on the team, barring the tree man. So another reason that the passer is a little bit of an unsung, not an unsung hero, but is an absolute monster, is not only has it got the 2+ pass, it comes as standard with this skill, pass. And what the skill pass allows you to do is, let's just say you want to make a pass and there's a -1 modifier to it, meaning you need to make a pass on a 3+, you roll a 2. Oh no. You don't have to spend a precious team reroll to be able to re-roll that when you've got the pass skill. The pass skill gives you a free re-roll when you fail a passing ability without the need to use a team re-roll, which is just brilliant. So, I mean, 2 chances to make a 3+ roll is... Your chances are pretty good, aren't they? You're not going to... It can fail, but you would feel pretty good about having 2 cracks at being able to make a 3+ roll. So, pass is an absolute must skill on all throwers in the game. If you're playing any team that's got a positional named a thrower and they don't already start with pass, give it them as soon as possible. So let's move on to what skills they can access. However, I'm going to take a quick sip of my coffee, if you don't mind. Just give me a second. There we go. So, your 2 throwers that you can take will have primary access to agility, general, passing, which makes sense, and then the secondary of strength. So that's kind of identical to the lineman's progression abilities, except with it being a thrower, their primary includes passing. So yeah, it's the similar sort of rule. You want your passer to be fast and slick, and you want him to be good at passing. And then secondary secondary thought would probably be, and I want to make him a bit stronger. So it works out. It works out all right, doesn't it? If you're playing Wood Elves, you want your team to be fast. You want your team to be able to outrun your opponent. So you're gonna, and we being a thrower, you want it to be able to throw the ball. So you're gonna want agility, general, and passing as the primary skills. And then let's face it, a little bit further down the line in a league, if you've got all the AGP skills you want, you might have some spare SPP to start spending on some secondaries, which in this case would be strength. So, let's have a quick look. I do apologise, guys, I'm just adjusting my light. Next, we have got Wood Elf catchers. So, these are a little bit of a point of contention for me, because the catchers are great. They're fantastic. You can take 4, 0 to 4. They cost you 90k each. And they are movement 8, which, as we know, is, as I've explained, is a little bit above average for a Wood Elf team. And in the whole scope of Blood Bowl, is fantastic. Movement 8 is great. The downside to this is they are strength 2. Which means that the largest portion of Blood Bowl players, i.e. not the human players, the players in the game, that are strength 3, would always get a 2 dice block against them. I mean, you have got the extra movement to stay away from people, which is good, always useful, but these are the players that if you take them, you want to be really careful with. Because these are the guys that are going to have the most opportunities to have 2 dice, but even 3 dice blocks against them. And as we know, the Wood Elf team is 8+ armor across the board. So plenty of opportunities for your opponent to break that 8+ if they're getting that many 2 dice blocks against them. However, as we know, 2+ agility across the board. Obviously, this is good for all the same reasons I've explained for the other guys. We've got passing ability of 4+ again, because this guy's not a thrower, and as we know, 8+ armor. So the key things that stand out here is we've got the extra movement, but the extra movement is costing us, the 1 extra movement compared to the rest of the team, is costing us 1 of our strength, taking us down to 2. So it's got some skills, and it's got a skill that will actually help it become more survivable, so it kind of takes away the sting a little bit of that being reduced to 2 strength. It's got the dodge skill. The dodge is multifaceted. It's essentially when you're being blocked, the result on a dice that is like a POW with an exclamation mark, the defender stumbles result. If you get that against a player with dodge, they get to ignore the POW and treat it as a pushback. So there is a little extra bit of survivability there. Obviously, the other aspect of dodge is that if you fail a dodge roll, you get a free reroll. So yeah, it does have that little bit of survivability thanks to dodge, but strength 2 does still sting. And the other skill it's got, as you can expect with it being a catcher, it's got the catch skill. And catch is essentially a copy and paste skill of pass. However, instead of when doing a passing throw, it's about catching the ball and not picking the ball up and receiving handoffs. Sorry. If you need to roll to receive a handoff or catch a ball and you fail it, if you've got the catch skill, you get a free reroll. As for primaries and secondaries, your catchers have got access to AG, so agility and general as primaries, and then passing and secondaries as passing and strength as secondaries. Sorry, which I kind of get. AG is always going to be the main thing that you're going to see as primaries on Wood Elves. I can't ever really see me putting a passing skill on a catcher or a war dancer. But at least if it's in the secondary and you've got enough SPP, you've got the option is there for you to do that if you wanted to. So I kind of get it. And here we are. We move on to the absolute all-star, superstar, all-round menace of the war. I nearly leaked the name of it earlier than of the Wood Elf team. You can take 0 to 2 of these guys, and we are talking about the War Dancers. These are the most expensive player on the team, even more expensive than the Tree Man that we're going to talk about next. These come in at a massive 125k each. And as we spoke about at the beginning, if you're playing with a 1 million budget, 2 of those guys is going to set you back a quarter of your budget straight away. But these guys are well worth it. We're talking movement 8, strength 3. So we've got the extra movement of the catcher without the minus to a strength. 2+ agility as standard across the board on Wood Elves. 4+ passing, which, for non-thrower players on a Wood Elf team is pretty normal. They do still only have the 8+ armour. However, this is the first blodger that we're going to speak about. And a blodger is a nickname for a player that has the block skill and the dodge skill. So, as we know, the dodge skill, I said, you get to ignore a certain dice result that would usually see you knocked down and treat it as a pushback instead. Well, block kind of does the same, except you don't get pushed back, you just stay stood up in place. So there are 2 instances on dice rolls where you can stop yourself from being knocked down. Literally, against a blodger, the only way you're getting those guys down is if you roll the POW rather than they both down or the defender stumbles. You've got to knock them down. You can't rely on any of the other ones that would usually knock somebody down unless they've got. You've got to knock them straight down. They ignore all the other dice, the dice stuff thanks to block and dodge. So that for me, the extra movement, the 2+ agility, and the fact they have block and dodge is why they cost 125k. But trust me, these are the guys that you want to max out on your team as soon as possible. They're an absolute nightmare. People hate them. They do have one more skill in the form of leap. And leap is a really good skill because not a lot of people, 1, know about it, 2, know what it does, and 3, not many people play against it. So they're not very prepared for it. Leap, in Blood Bowl, you can jump over prone players to be able to, if they're blocking the path, you can jump over them at an agility roll. However, the leap skill allows you to jump over empty squares randomly or even standing players. So with the right dice rolls and the right setup, you can just jump straight over your opponent's line and run straight into their backfield. It's phenomenal. I've had it work a couple of times. It has gone wrong plenty of times, but the times where it's worked has been absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, it's a massively underrated skill. I just can't understand why more people don't take it when it don't just come as standard. So your War Dancers, your super expensive War Dancers, are going to come in with primaries of agility in general, as expected, and they're going to have the secondary of passing and strength, just like the catchers. Again, this makes perfect sense. I don't really understand the need for passing as a secondary. However, if people did want to develop more players to be able to do some passing, to make the team more versatile, I get it. It's not for me, but I get why they would put that there for people that might want to do that. So we are down to one player left to speak about on this team. You can only take one of these guys, and we are talking about the Loren Forest Treeman. Coming in at 120k, yes, you heard that right, it's $5,000 cheaper than the War Dancers, because the War Dancers are just that badass. Only movement 2, which I think is this guy's biggest downfall, personally, because the times when I've taken the Loren Forest Treeman, he spends the entire time in the middle of the pitch, not really doing much other than being a bit of a roadblock, which is good, but if you have an opponent who becomes wise to that and doesn't buy into it, you have got a very expensive player not doing very much. He is strength 6, which is the highest in the game. It's very unlikely that he's not going to get 2 dice blocks against pretty much anything. So that's, you're paying for the strength, and you got the low movement because it's literally got the highest strength in the game. It's got an agility 5+, so you're not going to be wanting to pick the ball up with this guy. You're not going to be wanting to throw the ball to him and have him roll to catch it. You're not going to want to have him dodging out or anything like that. This is not the type of player to be doing anything that involves anything quick and nimble. 5+, as soon as you get a modifier, a minus modifier, you're talking 6s only. So yeah, and quite similarly, his passing ability is also 5+, so not only is he not going to be catching the ball, he ain't going to be throwing it either. Although his second characteristic that really justifies him, he's got the highest armor in the game, 11+ on 2d6 to break his armor. So for 120k, we've got movement 2, strength 6, agility 5, passing 5, but armor 11+. You've got to roll really well to kill him, and that's only made more difficult by some of his skills. Let's talk through some of his skills. As he's a big guy, he gets the Loner 4+ skill. Essentially, this means that because he's not the same race as the team is playing for, because he's not an elf, he's not really that interested about the team. So you kind of have to roll a d6 and beat whatever's in the brackets. For example, this one is, as I said, Loner 4+. You've got to beat that with a d6 before you can use a team reroll to be able to reroll something that he's failed at. It doesn't come up too often because I'm kind of scared of Loner, so I try not to use rerolls on big guys with it anyway. But yeah, it makes sense, but I kind of avoid it. The next skill he's got is Mighty Blow +1, and this is a fantastic skill, which with strength 6 as well, makes him a killing machine. So not only is he getting 2 and 3 dice blocks on stuff, because he's got strength 6, when he does, and he gets to make armor rolls, he can add a +1 to anything he rolls for armor. That's just insane. So let's just say he's attacking somebody with... Now he needs to roll 9+ to break somebody's armor. If he uses his Mighty Blow, it becomes 8+. But you have to say, before you're rolling a dice, whether you're going to apply the Mighty Blow to the... No, I think that might be an old edition. Yeah, if you don't need it for the armor, you then can apply it to the injury instead. That might be wrong. I'm not sure if you have to declare it before you roll anything so that you can't just save it for the injury. I think you have to declare it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm stuck in a bit of a brain loop there. So we've got Stand Firm as well, which means if your opponent blocks you and they get a pushback result, you can just straight up refuse to be pushed back. It is your choice. If you don't want to use Stand Firm, you can allow your player to be pushed back, which sometimes you might do because it might be advantageous to board control and things like that. But you have the opportunity to say, I'm not going anywhere. We got Strong Arm, which means it gets a +1 to passing when throwing teammates. Take Root is this guy's skill that is very similar to Bonehead and very stupid that some of the other big guys have. However, this guy's is a lot better. Take Root, you have to roll. If you roll, when he activates, if you roll a 1, his roots have grown into the ground and he can't move anywhere at all. The only time he becomes unrooted is if he gets knocked over and stands back up, like his roots have been ripped out of the ground. The good thing about this is, although he's stuck in place, and this is part of the reason why he does become a bit of a roadblock in the middle of the pitch, the reason that this is not so bad is because he can still hit people that are in his tackle zone. So if somebody's close enough for him to hit and he doesn't have to move, he can still hit them, and he doesn't lose his tackle zone. So although he might not be able to move, you're still getting a player that's strength 6 who is going to be a real roadblock, because if he's stuck in place and your opponent's players can still get hit by him if they get close, they're going to avoid him at all costs. So, you know, it's expensive. It's kind of something that I get later league, is a tree man, because if you have a couple of games where he gets rooted, you've spent 120k just to have him in the middle, stopping people from going there. Do you know what I mean? Which, it is good. It does work, and it's a solid tactic, but it's such a versatile team is Wood Elves that, you know, you'd rather spend 120k or put 120k towards getting that second war dancer. Do you know what I mean? And the final skill he's got is throw teammate. However, with him being on the Wood Elf team, he can't actually throw any of his teammates. I think this is just a copy and paste job from the tree man that can play for halflings that can throw the halflings down the pitch. So yeah, we've gone through every position. We've covered the lineman, we've covered the thrower, we've covered the catcher, war dancer, and the tree man. We need to talk about rerolls. You'll be surprised that they actually have really cheap team rerolls, so you can take 0 to 8 as you can with any team. And their rerolls are only 50k. I only ever play with, on average, I only really play with 2 rerolls. So when I'm building a Wood Elf roster, I just buy my reroll straight away. I know I want to. It's only going to cost me 100k, and then I can build a team around everything else. And you would be surprised. We're going to speak about some of the rosters you can take in just a moment, and you will be very surprised. Wood Elves are tier 1, as we spoke about in the last episode. What the tier system means, that means that they're very top out of 3. Special rules, Elven Kingdoms League. What the special rules section on the team page in the rulebook means is when you get to the star player pages, it will tell you what teams they can play for. So any star player that's got plays for Elven Kingdoms League, that means that they can play for that team. And it also says here that they have access to an apothecary, because some teams don't. A lot of the undead teams get a necromancer instead of an apothecary. So that's a quick, well, not a quick rundown. We'll be talking about for like nearly half an hour. That's a rundown of the Wood Elf team by position, what each one does, price, cost, all that business. I have kind of just literally read it off the page, but I've sprinkled in a little bit of analysis and some opinion in there. So now we've gone through each one of the players, let's talk about how we can build a team. And the first roster I'm going to speak about is one that I have never been brave enough to use. But it's one that is shouted about on the internet. And I think the guys at Bonehead Podcast gave it the name 2 Dance 2 Reroll. And it kind of stuck because I think everyone kind of refers to it now. And that is essentially where your team will consist entirely of 2 War Dancers, 9 linemen, and 2 rerolls. Now, I don't actually remember the cost of this just off the top of my head. Let's have a quick look. I do have some software open on my laptop here where we can work that out really quick. So 2 rerolls, 2 War Dancers, and a crap ton of linemen. Let's take a look. Oh, it's taking a little while to load. My prediction is that this is going to come in at about 980,000, around that. Oh, perfect. Literally 980. So, sorry about that. I'm pretty impressed that I thought of that off the top of my head. So, your lineup is 2 War Dancers and 9 linemen with 2 rerolls, and that leaves you with 20k spare to spend, so you could put some of that into dedicated fans or some assistant coaches or cheerleaders. This is not a lineup I would take. It's a perfectly solid lineup, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. However, as much as I love the idea of having 2 war dancers, the lack of catchers and throwers and the passing aspect of the game, which I've said before is my favourite part about Wood Elves, is just too absent from it. But it's a solid lineup. I can see why people use it. I've absolutely no doubt that it works. So, if you want to, if you already play Wood Elves and you want to give it a go or something different, there's that. Or if you're new and you're not sure what to which sort of setup to play, if that appeals to you, then go for it. Just going to take a quick drink of my coffee, guys. So, let's talk about a different setup. And this is my setup. This is the one that I will always build for if I'm starting a new Wood Elf team for a league or for a tournament. This is the one I'll build. It gives you the best of everything. It gives you the best mixture of all the different positions. So we're talking 1 dancer, so 1 war dancer, 1 thrower, 2 catchers, 7 linemen, 2 rerolls. Now, I am fairly certain that if my memory serves me right, I think that is also 980k in terms of team budget. Let's take a quick look. Two catchers. And a thrower. Oh, no. So that one, the one that we've just spoke about with 1 war dancer, 2 catchers, a thrower, and 7 linemen, and 2 rerolls is actually going to be 990k. So it's a little bit more expensive than the other one. However, you do still have 10k left over to put into some assistant coaches, cheerleaders, dedicated fans, all that business. This is the one. The reason I like this one so much is because you start off with a little bit of everything. So from this point, if you wanted 5 games into a league, if you've got some treasury to buy some new players, you could buy that extra war dancer, or you could buy a 3rd catcher, or a 2nd thrower. You've got the building blocks for any way that you want to play already in place when you play with this roster, and that is why I like it. Admittedly, I go down the same route every time. I always go down the passing route, so I get an extra war dancer, give both my war dancers catch, so that I've essentially got 4 people with a catch skill. I absolutely annihilate my thrower with throwing skills. I like to give them Nerves of Steel, I give them Accurate, I give them Cannoneer, all those things to make it so that they avoid minus modifiers when passing to make them as good as possible. This is my template. This is the one I always go for. There is more, and you don't have to go with this one just because I'm saying so, but this is the one that I like the best. Let's have a look. What is the next one? I have written it down here. Yeah, there we go. So this one is very similar to the first one with all the linemen, because you are going to have 9 linemen, but instead of having 2 war dancers, you have a war dancer and a thrower. So 9 linemen, a war dancer, a thrower, and 3 rerolls. The fact that you've replaced one of the war dancers with a thrower means that you've saved some money to be able to afford an extra reroll. This is a really good one, because not only do you get the extra reroll, 3 rerolls is fantastic, you've got the very bare bones capability of passing. You've got a thrower who you can throw some skills on to make him even better at passing. You've got a war dancer who is already good at catching because he's agility 2+, but if you throw the catch skill on him, he becomes even better. So this is kind of a way, the last one that we spoke about was where you get catches and a bit of everything to be able to develop how you want. This is a way to be able to do that a little bit slower, but you get that extra reroll. A lot of people get hung up on rerolls, and I can totally understand people sacrificing other positionals in exchange for another reroll. So this is, if you want to be a little bit less gung-ho into, developing the team, if you want to be less direct is probably the way that I'd put it, in developing your team, then this is a good one. This is a good way to go. You've got the safety of the extra reroll, you've got the capability to pass, and then You can always buy catchers further down the line, but you can soup up that one War Dancer you've got with a catch skill. Even give him Nerves of Steel so he's not catching on a minus modifier. Things like that. And then your thrower, again, Cannoneer, accurate. Oh, there's a helicopter flying over my house. Anyway. Cannoneer, accurate, things like that. And you've already got the perfect link-up for a passing game. The only problem is, because you're only sitting at one of each, if either of them get injured, you're playing with a team full of linemen the next game. Because, let's just say, both your War Dancer and your thrower got injured. You have to, when you take Journeyman, they have to be linemen, so your next game would be entirely a full team of linemen. However, you would have 3 rerolls. So, this one's a little bit more risky for me. However, it definitely has a place in the game, and I can totally understand why people take it. Another one is for the dark and dangerous and risky people out there. And that is not me. I am not that type of person. But for those of you who have no fear and are more than happy and more than capable of playing with only one single reroll, this one is for you. So, 1 reroll, 7 linemen, 1 catcher, 1 thrower, 2 War Dancers. Now, I can totally understand, based on the stats we talked about for the War Dancer and how crazy they are, I can totally understand somebody wanting to sacrifice a catcher and a reroll for an extra War Dancer. Because you've got to realise, this is basically the exact same one as the positional spread one that I said, where we get a War Dancer, 2 catchers, a thrower, 7 linemen, 2 rerolls. It's the exact same, however, we've dropped a reroll and a catcher to be able to afford that extra War Dancer. This team is fantastic. 7 linemen. We know the linemen are fast. We know that they're strong enough to, to be able to take on other strength-free players. The catcher, it's fast. It's good at catching the ball. The thrower, we know what that can do. 2 War Dancers. Fantastic. This team is amazing. If you could somehow afford a second reroll and keep this team, it would unequivocally be the single best starting roster for Wood Elves in all of Blood Bowl, bar none. But for me, 1 reroll is just far too risky. I play at 2 and sometimes take 3. I've very rarely been brave enough to go down to 2. But if you're a bit of a maverick and you want to give it a go, by all means, it's still a very, very solid roster. So, let's have a quick look. Do I have one more? No, I don't actually. I do apologise. That is them all. The scary 1 reroll one was the absolute final one. So just to quickly recap on those, for me, although I did say at the time, the absolute best one is the positional spread. The one where you get one War Dancer, 1 thrower, 2 catchers, 7 linemen, and 2 rerolls. You get the safety of the 2 rerolls that I'm more comfortable with. You get 2 catchers, which are fantastic. You get the single thrower, which is all I ever play with anyway, and you get your 1 War Dancer. Couple of games in, if you have some high-scoring games, you will be able to afford that second War Dancer, and this team becomes an absolute animal. Keep those guys alive for another couple of games, win some games, get some high-scoring games, you've got your tree man. You can take one of your linemen off and use him as a sub, bang your tree man in, and you have got everything you need to succeed, in my opinion. You could want... Some people are... Maybe I'm a little bit stupid for only playing with 1 thrower. You might want to buy an extra thrower or you catch it, but that's what the league play system's all about. You can decide what your team needs as you go along. So, just a quick summary then. Not on the rosters, but on Wood Elves in general. What we've figured out is they've got some really expensive positionals. However, those costs are massively justified. They're a super, super fast competitive team. There are some teams that can go against that they can go toe-to-toe with. But again, as I've explained, it's not for me. It might be for you guys, and if you've heard anything this podcast that's made you think, nah, I'm not bothered, I'm going to give it a go, by all means go for it, and I hope you have all the success in the world. I hope you absolutely nail your opponent's teammates. But yeah, we're talking right now the absolute best touchdown scorers in the game, probably joint first with Skaven. And they do it by passing, which is even better. Skaven do it by running and scuttling about, being little pussies. But, you know, us Wood Elves, we do it with some flair. So yeah, if you are interested in a team that is fast and can score fast and is great at evading your opponent, and you're not too fussed about getting involved in the nitty-gritty trench business of smashing into people and all that, Wood Elves are the absolute perfect team for you. Definitely. And I urge you to give them a go. So, that has been the very first team spotlight. Now, Wood Elves are my favourite team, so I may have babbled and gone on and on and on. If I have, I apologise profusely. Although you will probably hear less of me in the next one because we are going to be talking about Skaven this Saturday. As I say, the episode this Saturday may come to you Saturday evening, or probably I'll probably leave it till Sunday morning. We're going to be doing exactly what we've just done for this episode, but we're going to do it about Skaven. I'm going to have Gav, my friend who is a Skaven coach. He's going to be on board. He's going to be talking as passionately as I have in today's episode about Skaven. Tell us all the things about them, what they're good at, all that business. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you very much for listening to this Wood Elf TED Talk. And I look forward to seeing you all for the Skaven Spotlight this Saturday or Sunday. Until then, guys, you take care. And thank you very much for listening.